Broadcasting from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, to around the globe. You're listening to Shark Bite Biz, your exclusive place for business strategy, sales, marketing, and tech in the roaring 20s. And now, here's your host, David Strausser.
It's time for a rockin' episode of Shark Bite Biz, and I'm your rockstar wannabe host, David Strausser, and this is your place to learn how to grow a business and have fun during complete business chaos. So we're going to have a short intro today because in the words of the legendary Joe Perry, we are just going to let the music do the talking. Some of our most popular episodes have been my friends in the music industry. Today's guest is a hired gun in a sense, but a hired gun that is living his dream. Not just his dream, the dream. Imagine one day on Mother's Day, hanging with your mom, and all of a sudden you get a call from Steven Tyler. Yes, I'm talking about the demon of screaming himself, saying they needed somebody immediately to sing backup vocals and play keyboards. Worst thing, you've got to get a flight halfway around the world within just a few hours. What would you do? Well, I know what I'd do. And today we're going to chat with a worker, somebody who has worked his way up to the top and now is working with one of America's greatest musical talents, the Bad Boys from Boston. Yeah, I'm talking about Aerosmith themselves. Dreams do come true. So you just got to make sure that you keep dreaming on, because whether it is in business or in music, you just have to keep at it. Make the relationships and do the right thing. Eventually, the door will open, as they did for today's guest. So who is today's guest? Buck Johnson. Singer, songwriter, musician. Buck Johnson is currently the keyboardist and backing vocalist for the legendary rock band Aerosmith and the Hollywood Vampires. He hails from the back roads of Shady Grove, Alabama, just outside Birmingham, where he grew up singing gospel throughout the South with his musical family. Since then, he has performed in churches, bars, festivals, and concert halls throughout the world. You know, I'm sorry. Usually I enjoy reading word for word the bios, the introductions that these artists or, experts or business owners gives me. This one has got to be like the most humblest one ever, because he's just not playing in concert halls throughout the world. He's playing with the Hollywood Vampires, Alice Cooper, Johnny Depp, Joe Perry, sometimes Duff from Guns N' Roses, various special guests. You're talking Aerosmith, and all that encompasses that. The Joe Perry Project. Oh my God. Come on. This is amazing. I love the guy. I love his own music. I've actually been to a couple Buck Johnson shows themselves. Amazing, especially when he whips out the Aerosmith covers. Love this guy. So without further ado, I present to you Mr. Buck Johnson.
Creative and innovation tips.
Hey, Buck. Welcome to Shark Bite Biz. It's a thrill to have you here on the show, man.
Hey, David. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. So, very first question. I know who you are, but for all of our listeners out there that might not know you, can you tell us a little bit, who are you? What's your background? Give us the inside track.
I'll try to give the cliff notes. So I'm from, I always like to say, Shady Grove, Alabama, which is the back woods of outside of Birmingham. I grew up singing with my family. We traveled singing gospel music. So I was on stage from the time I was 5. And then I had some older cousins who said, you need to know this. And here's the Rolling Stones, and here's Led Zeppelin, and the Beatles, and the Who. And it opened up a whole new world for me. So it was always those English bands mainly who were influenced by the very thing I was singing growing up, because that made sense to me. So I love that kind of music. And then there was the American bands, like Aerosmith, who were influenced by the same things as well. So I moved to Los Angeles after college, had a publishing deal. I had a couple bands that were all supposed to be the next big thing that never was. And then I started playing with other artists. I did a live album as a backing vocalist for the Doobie Brothers. I did an album with this guy named Tal Bachman, who had a #1 hit called She's So High. I did keyboards and backing vocals on that record. I did a few other records like that. I toured with people like John Waite and Sean Mullins, Matthew Sweet. And then later I moved to Nashville to get closer to home. And we've been here about 12 years. And I had a band that we had a couple of top hits in the country market. Although if we came out in the 70s, we would have been a rock band.
It's kind of changed a little bit right now.
Well, it was a vocal band, and we were pretty rocking too.
Yeah.
I think it was good country rock. But anyway, after that ended, I went back I have a studio here in Nashville, and I just got a publishing deal, and I started writing songs. And then a couple years later, I got a call through a mutual friend of Aerosmith. They needed a keyboard player, and I was literally in Alabama visiting my mom for Mother's Day, and her Mother's Day's wish is to go to church and sing a song together. And so right before we get in the car, I get a call from Steven Tyler from Istanbul. And so the next day, I'm on a plane to Istanbul.
Wow, so Steven called you himself from Istanbul.
Well, I knew that my friend Marty Fredrickson, who wrote Jaded with Steven and co-produced a couple of their later records and wrote other hits with them. I've known Marty for years. The connection there is with my good friend and former bandmate Damon Johnson, who had a band called Brother Kane in the 90s. Marty produced Brother Kane, wrote some other hits with Damon. And so Marty always knew me, and we were friends. We never worked together, but he knew what I did. This guy, can sing the Robert Plant stuff and plays keys, writes songs, plays little guitar. And that's exactly what Aerosmith needed, someone who could sing with Steven, sing above Steven, but sing it with, full voice, with all the gusto that Steven sings with, and can play keys and play some acoustic. So when they needed somebody, they reached out to Marty. Marty reached out to me. I didn't think anything was going to come of it, and then so I was kind of blown away when he actually called that Sunday. And so I said, "Mom, I'd love to stay, but I got to head back to Nashville because I'm leaving town." And then 6 years. It's been over 6 years now that I've been with them.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah. So I've got to ask you, you blew your mom off on Mother's Day to try out.
Well, I did go to church. We did sing the song. And then I said, well, I can't stay for brunch. I got to go. Because my dad and mom have always been huge musical influences, of course. My mom's an amazing piano player. And so I do think that because from the time she says I was singing before I was walking, and that's probably because of them always having music, creating music in the home from the time I can remember. So she was just excited for me. She's like, you go, Buck. So it was awesome.
That's awesome.
It's great to have that. Well, to have that encouragement and support.
Definitely
is a difference maker.
Was she an Aerosmith fan as well too, or just so?
Well, she was probably more like a lot of people, a Steven Tyler fan because of American Idol.
Right.
So she learned, which, that brought in a whole new group of fans for the band, because of that. Mostly younger, but older people who, my mom's the real deal. She didn't play all that stuff. She just may not have been aware of, she probably had heard, Dream On. I know she knew that song and some of the bigger hits, but, she didn't know the catalog or the band. And it probably would. But they came to a show when we were in Atlanta in 2014, and they loved it. They just loved it.
That's amazing. So obviously, I'm a big fan of you as playing with Aerosmith, as well as you yourself. I don't know if you know this, but I got an Aerosmith tattoo. It is the only tattoo I got, and it's the Bat Wings logo one from Get Your Wings.
Yes. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I have to get a couple fandom questions out of the way, or else, the listeners on this show will kill me.
Sure.
But first one, what is your favorite Aerosmith song to perform?
To perform. All right. Well, that's good that you clarified that because people say, what's your favorite Aerosmith song? And I might say Dream On. But on Dream On, I don't really play or sing on that because Steven plays and sings. So I don't get to perform on that one as much. There's so many that I like for different reasons. And that's always a hard question because ask me the next day and I may say something different. But can I give you a narrow down, like, okay, I love this one because of that. Like, I love playing Chip Away because it's got a great honky-tonk, bluesy piano part, and it's fun to sing. I like Living on the Edge. For some reason, I just like singing that song with Steven. And it just, it holds up, man. Nowadays more than ever.
Oh, yeah.
I like that's out of the newer stuff. That's one of the few that I like.
Okay.
A lot.
So you're one of those old school Aerosmith fans.
Yeah, I like the bluesier stuff myself more so. Not that I don't like the newer stuff. Right. I love it. It's great.
So what about
Loving the Elevator is a lot of fun. A lot of fun to sing and play. It's just so much energy. But when we do Last Child and it's that stinky groove, it's just so saucy and Joey can bring his funk to it, just like he does with Walk This Way. I like singing that one with them, and I get to jam on some. They want me to do that. Sometimes they say, "Why are you playing that? It wasn't on the record." I was like, "Yeah, but what band wants to play exactly what's on their record?" And I never have dared to play anything unless they point to me like, "Give me some of this," I'll do it.
So do they do that? Like Steven will point to you to tell you to. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's one of the beauties of playing with that band is that they're so in the moment. That was the hardest thing about transferring to doing this Vegas run we did last year. Is that Vegas in the theatrical world is more about everything being the same like it was the last show. They want it like it's on the click, it's on the time code, everything's automated. You can't box Aerosmith. You never know what's going to happen next. It's like a freight train that could come off the wheels off the rails around the
What
turn.
about Train Kept It Rolling? They
I love that.
Does that energy, I mean, it's not their original song, but the energy during that, as a fan, it looks amazing. Is it that real?
It is. It's that ferocious. Wow. And you never know sometimes, there may be a mistake made, but those mistakes can be a beautiful thing because it's like, you're on your toes, like what's going to happen next? All right, we're in that jam part of Rats in the Cellar, where it's an outro that, we kind of know the cue. It takes us to this part of the outro, but then it can be a jam. And it's just like anybody's guess. How long does Joe want to keep playing? And whenever he feels it, it's a very in the moment feel. And I think for the fans, the reviews from Vegas were really great because of that. Like they were saying, like Aerosmith refuses to bow down. And I love that because every show was different. You never knew what to expect. And then all my friends who are professional musicians who play at the highest levels that came to the show because they're in Vegas, they all said, I felt like a teenager again.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it's exciting. Yeah.
What's most amazing is that this is essentially their 50th year anniversary because they formed in 1970. The first album with Dream On came out in 73, but they formed in 1970. So 50 years later, and they're still able to rock it with all 5 original members. That's amazing. Incredible.
It is. I don't think even the Stones could say that.
No.
And that's kind of the benchmark for them because the Stones was a few years ahead of them.
Yep.
And, there are always those comparisons. But Aerosmith is a band that stands on its own, obviously. And it's hard for, just in general for bands, no matter how good they are, to hold it together. Bands are lucky to last 5 years. So 50 years, it's sometimes the worst thing that can happen to a band is success. And so they've had so much success and they've weathered the storms over the years. But, at the end of the day, they're still brothers and they love each other and care about each other. But, like family, sometimes, as Keith Moon said once, the best way to keep a band together is keep them away from each other as much as possible. So I think they have to have their own individual lives and stuff. But when they hit the stage, whatever is going on, the periphery, that is maybe disagreements like family that fights, that goes away. On stage, they've become this band again that I get to sit in with every show. And I'm like a kid in a candy store.
Awesome.
Are you kidding me? You know? So it is as awesome as it can get for what I get to do.
Yeah. So I don't know how many people know this, but there's another super famous band that you also perform with, the Hollywood Vampires, right?
Yeah. And that's because of Joe Perry. You know, Joe, at Hollywood, for those who don't know, Joe, the Hollywood Vampires is Alice Cooper, Johnny Depp, and Joe Perry. And I should also mention Tommy Hendrickson. He's a big part of that as well. He plays with Alice Cooper. He's been an artist, and he's a producer. He produced the last album that came out last year, excuse me. Joe, when they decided to in 2018 to go back out, they wanted to reorganize it, and they brought in Glenn Sobel from Alice Cooper Band on drums, and brought in me because of Joe, and you know, Tommy too. Tommy had seen me play. We became friends, and I thought he felt like I was a good fit. And also this guy named Chris Wise, who was also on that Tal Bachman album. And we played that record was over 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. And, you know, She's So High, you can look it up. It was a huge hit. And we thought, man, we're going to get to play a lot together, man. This is great. Well, we never played together again until 20 years later with the Hollywood Vampires. So it was really a come full circle type thing. And Chris was part of a band, the Cult for about 10 years. And he's played on Ozzy Osbourne's albums. He's a huge talent and has his own band as well. So everybody in those bands are kind of their own artists. Tommy does his own artistry, and Chris does, and I do mine. And I think that's why they like to be surrounded with guys who, understand the artist's perspective and respect, you guys, you're the boss, but they also want us to contribute, they bring something more to the table than just play what's on the record, So, that's the fun part of it. And then I think, it takes, the kind of guys I feel like everything that I learned in my career, all the mistakes I made, help prepare me to walk into the situations.
Yeah. You're in a pretty good situation, Buck.
Yeah, it's a great. Hey, but you know what? I've been blessed. I've been around. I have a great support system. My wife, we've been married for many years, and she's always been supportive. And trust me, when you get into this, it's not about. At first, it's about because you love to sing and perform and show off and get girls, attract girls. And then, money and fame, you kind of have those stars in your eyes. But then after a while, it's like you're either a lifer or you're not.
Right.
And if you're in it for money and fame, do something else, if you're talented at. Because music is a calling, and to be a lifer means there's most likely going to be more lean years than the good years.
Right.
And
so one last question quickly here for fandom. How different of an environment is it working with Alice and Johnny and Joe with the Hollywood Vampires compared to Steven, Joe, Brad with Aerosmith? I mean, are they similar or are they night and day different?
I wouldn't say it's night and day, but there are differences. I mean, musically, they're both very satisfying. And obviously, I love it. And they're all great people. So don't believe everything you read, or what you hear in the social media world. They're all great guys. They all come from humble backgrounds, and and they're very intelligent, very smart. And there's a reason why they are where they are. Alice is a true gentleman and pleasure to work with, and Johnny's just a sweetheart. I think the differences would be, with Aerosmith, we do a tour, say, in Europe, and it's going to be at least 2 days off in between shows. Because, Steven, what he does is incredible. I mean, he's 70-something, 71. I don't want to, you can look that up easily. But he runs around stage for almost 2 hours like a teenager, and he sings everything. Well, Steve and I sing everything, and even in Vegas, there was no canned music, Stephen would not allow that. It was too much pride, and he delivers. So for him to do what he does, he needs those 2 days to recruit. Plus, there's the travel involved,
Yeah,
Steven's
I guess, opinions and thoughts about that is pretty well documented, especially how Steven feels because of his voice and needing the vocal cords, compared to Joe Perry, who I see the complaints that he has where he wants to play every night. So I see that.
Well, musicians just want to play. Brad Woodford, when he walks into a venue, he goes to his dressing room, there's a guitar and amp waiting for him. Before he does anything, he sits down, picks up the guitar. He just wants to play. They just want to play. Singers are always different because the instrument is here, and it's a very physical thing, and you don't always have 100% control over it, especially when you add in travel and age. And that's just two things. You need the rest. You got to recoup, and that's a difference, And so I can understand that. Now, with the Vampires, this is not a band that's been together for 50 years. This is fresh and new. This is like a fun thing for them.
Right.
They get together.
And a lot of it's cover songs, too, with the Hollywood Vampires.
Well, and I would say the last record, we got away from that.
Right.
It's like, I think there's only one or two covers. Heroes featuring Johnny and vocals.
Okay.
Which we had to. I have to say this. I think we had to encourage him, because he didn't. They don't want to hear me sing this. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And you said, trust me, man. When we did it the first time, he sounded so good live. I'm like, man, this is a home run for you, and we need to find more material. So, he did that, and he did the song, People Who Died. And he kills that one, too. So it was a good juxtapost between the two that he loves to do. And so, with him and Alice and Joe, we do a lot more shows because Joe sings some songs. We're like our Europe tour, which will be next year. We're playing almost every night. So in a month's time, Vampires will probably do twice the show.
Right.
So there's not as much leisure time, although when we're around each other, we all hang out together. Whereas Aerosmith, they've been doing this for a long time. There's families involved. So there's not as much hanging out together.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not, there's some of that, but not nearly the same.
Yeah. Plus, it sounds like you were actually there recording with Hollywood Vampires, too, on that album, right?
Oh, yeah. Some of it was done, the drums have to be done in the studio. So Glenn did those in L.A., and then Tommy would bring the files. One thing about technology is as much as it's taken away from how you monetize music. And listen,
so this is great because you're walking right into
I'm working with
discussion.
You, man. I'm segueing for you. I've done this.
No, this is a business podcast, but
yes, it is.
They were my next questions right there about the digital transformation.
Exactly, and even though I do this for the love of music, because this is the only thing I'm really good at. I've done other things. Trust me, I've done my slew of crappy jobs just to keep the lights on, especially when I was starting off struggling in LA. I always like to tell people I had a job. I was waiting tables, and I was in a band, and I sold stun guns to truck stops. I made cold calls. This fly-by-night lawyer.
Wow!
And I'm like, that was interesting time in life. But it is a music business, and as much as we love to do it, we got to eat. And most people don't get rich. So all the changes in the industry ever since Napster, it's like, the complaints from rock stars, they got it so good. Well, but 90% of the people don't. And this is technology has pretty much eliminated the music middle class. In Nashville, 20-something years ago, there were probably around 4,000 to 5,000 publishing deals. People who had mortgages, 2 cars, kids going to school, but they're writing songs. They're not getting rich, but they're paying their bills. Today, there's less than 400 maybe. And the publishing deals are nowhere near what they used to be. So the way we make money, and it's not like the pie has gotten smaller because people are not buying music because they can stream it or they can download it for free. If anything, it's changed and the pie has gotten bigger because it's advertising. It's Google. It's all these other people that have platforms that they can use music for advertising, and Forget about the torrent sites that exist in Russia and China, that the money that's being generated, that to the content creators, the people who created this, who spend a lifetime of dedication to learn the craft, because not everybody can do it. Everyone thinks they can do it. But just like you see somebody on American Idol, like, oh, they think they've got the greatest voice in the world until they're pointed out. No, you don't. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have music in your life. We all have the ability to sing and keep rhythm. It's in our DNA. But not everybody's going to get the opportunity to make a living at it. I'm one of the fortunate ones. But let me tell you, it's tough. And you better do it because you love it. But you also got to make a living. And so things like making an album. Why make an album? Well, because we're not going to really make much money off the album, but we're going to be able to tour and promote it that way and sell merchandise. So the music becomes the flame that fires up everything else that actually generates income for you. The music's the passion. It creates the viral thing that makes people want to buy your T-shirts, but then hopefully start buying your clothing line. And then if you really do well, they're buying your cologne.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, one of the things that you just said about the streaming and the streaming revenue, I mean, we have that validated because, as I was telling you earlier, Brian Vander Ark, lead singer of the Verb Pipe, his episode came out just a couple weeks ago, and he was telling us during quarter 2, his former number 1 hit, The Freshman, had over 4 million plays. And for those 4 million plays, he got a whopping $250.
And see, most people are not aware of that. I don't probably have much sympathy for the plight of the rock star. But, the reality is when you see what the money really is, it's like, well, for what it's generating, that brand, that's not a lot of money. A friend of mine co-wrote and produced a song all about the bass. All about that.
Oh, yeah.
Hit,
oh,
right?
Yeah. I know.
And he's my friend Kevin. He went to he was going to Congress when they just passed the Music Modernization Act last year, and it is a step in the right direction. It's not nearly enough, but it's a step in the right direction because the copyright laws hadn't changed since 1976. And it's one of the
very antiquated laws because the laws are set for a time. I mean, CDs didn't exist. Digital, were just a figment of the imagination. That was science fiction when this bill was actually wrote, and yet that dictated the artist's rights today for monetization.
And how much? And it's one of the things the government dictates how much you get paid. For what you have created, your widget, a song that you wrote. And there's a difference between what the songwriter makes and what the artist makes. And that's different on Spotify and all these other platforms. And most people don't understand that. It's a complicated business in a way. It really isn't, but it has become complicated. So my friend Kevin, he's one of the few that have gone to Congress and have fought to get these things changed. And he brought his statement, his Spotify statement, that showed this was the number 1 song in the world. Now, he's had success before, but generally speaking, those things are lifetime achievements that happen maybe once in your life, if you're lucky. And he's worked really hard to get to that point. And he's on a level that most people will never attain. It's like the guy who plays running back in the NFL. He's got a window this big. And he's achieved that. And through fortune and hard work. So he goes there and he says, the number 1 song in the world, here's my Spotify statement, $4,000 and some change. Now, it's one thing if I create something that, it's either not quality enough or good enough or doesn't get the exposure or whatever, and I don't make any money. But it's a whole different thing when you've created something and you're not making hardly any money, but someone is. Someone's making that money. And it's not the content creator. And that's what people have to keep aware of because, again, we're not talking about millions of dollars in most cases. We're talking about, hey, I'm able to buy groceries and pay my rent kind of money.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a tough situation. And, I wonder when the solution's going to come. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem like it's around the corner, but they are making some baby steps.
Yeah, they're making baby steps, and I think it's the Wild West right now. I think technology changes so much. It's like in just a few years, my laptop's going to be no good. I got to buy something new. The different ports, different cables. It's all updating and it's growing at such a rate that our society can't keep up with it. And what it's going to affect. I think I think the thing that threatens people's jobs more than anything else is the microchip. Because, what happens when they start have self-driving trucks, the truckers?
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole list of things. So music
Music
has been on the front lines longer than anybody else because it was one of the first businesses effective. And it's a business that people are passionate about because music is something you don't know what you miss until it's gone. You take music out of a movie, you take it out of a restaurant. You'll realize how important music is, It may have been more important to people in the 60s and 70s, politically. It was a passion, There was a mystique to artists, And now everybody's so accessible that it's become more disposable. And there's so many people creating. There's a lot of great music out there being created. You just don't know about it because it's the white noise of everything that's being created that's counting us.
Yeah, there's just so much right now. I think a lot of people are, so many things are being created, from this podcast to a kabillion shows on Netflix to, new music all the time that's flooding services like Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. And it's really hard to find people. That's one of the reasons that I kind of still appreciate I have Sirius radio as well as the FM radio here, because it allows me to step outside the box of the people I know to kind of discover new music that's kind of good sometimes.
And and listen, as long as I've been doing this, I'm always amazed that there's some artist or record. I'm like, how did I not know about this? And I think it's great. I think it's great that there's so much still to learn, and be aware and stretch the boundaries. Most of the great artists I've worked with, there are more people who are critics who sit on the sidelines and can bash this or bash that. It's like, you know what? Most of the legends that I've got to work with, they like a lot more stuff than you would think. You'd be surprised what they love. Because usually, they know their stuff. They know their heroes. The Aerosmith would be the Yardbirds. How many people really know the Yardbirds material? Or Led Zeppelin, but they do know Led Zeppelin. But I'm just saying that there's a variety of stuff you become more well-rounded and a better music. Yeah, and I think as far as musicians go, in this climate, in this world, and songwriters, is that we're
in the global pandemic right now, where musicians that maybe they're not as lucky to be able to play with Aerosmith like you, but what kind of pivots have you done right now during this time period in order to, just make everything work? Are you doing a lot more stuff digitally? How do you view that, Buck?
Since I've been on the road with Aerosmith for the last 6+ years, I have already been doing writing with other writers and other artists virtually on Skype or FaceTime. So I've always been doing that already. So especially during this pandemic, I'm doing a lot more of that. But with people in town that I normally would just, they would come to my studio or I'd go to their place. So do a lot more of that. And, as a songwriter in a studio, I've recruited and producer. I think you have to wear a lot of hats. So you've got to, some days I'm the side man for Aerosmith, and some days I am the artist. I go out and do my own tours, my own shows. Well, I can't play right now. So, there's no income coming from there. I won't be able to go out and make any money until next year. Hopefully, if all goes well. So the other things I can do, write songs, get placements. Companies still license music, although that has been on pause because studios are not.
Right, because they're not filming stuff.
They can't. Think about the insurance. Think about the cost of doing all those tests you're not talking, how much of a crew you're talking about?
Oh, yeah.
It could be a crew 50 to 100, and everyone's got to they don't have that 10 grand. The budgets are not there.
And then one positive, everything gets shut down, and you have people just waiting in limbo till it's good to come back.
I think the feeling is that that's going to start picking back up in the fall. It has changed. It'll be different. But they're going to need inventory. They're going to need songs. And so I still have my years of living in LA. I still have contacts with people who work in that field. And so I've been taking my time going through my inventory of my library of songs, which is in the hundreds, and going through the number of songs that I produce and own the master, because that's key, owning the master recording, separate from publishing. So it's two different things. And the songs that I own the master to, I got to brush those up. I've got to do an acoustic version, a drum and bass version, a 60-second version, a 30-second version.
Wow.
And when you're into the hundreds, it's a mountain of work because you're talking about licensing placements. And some of it can be big. Most of it is little, a couple $100, but they reuse that part of their library.
And that's so amazing because, I mean, I don't know if you look at it like this, but I mean, what you're doing, I mean, you are your own small business with that. And this is how you're pivoting in order to make the best of this situation so that you can drive your own personal revenue of Buck Johnson's music.
Well, that's the hope. There's no guarantees.
Right.
I work longer hours now during this pandemic than I ever did before, because that's what it takes. It's me working here, and I'm doing it by myself. And it's outside of the co-writes, which that could be a whole day, a co-write, to get it done right. And that's a potential income revenue, but it's down the road. Me doing this now is for potential income down the road. So in the immediate time, there is no money to be made. So, I have friends who are musicians who are not as fortunate as I have been, because in my world, yes, I'm really blessed. I get to play with bands like Aerosmith and Hollywood Vampires. But I've learned over the years, you have a great year like I had last year, you sock it away. You squirrel it away. So next year, even though this year was supposed to be great. It was supposed to be one of the busiest years ever for me. And I'm like, wow, this is great. And I thought, let's hold off on building that sun deck on the back of the house. Let's wait. Let's make sure until I'm on the plane to go over there, nothing's guaranteed. And thankfully we did, because I'm basically living off last year's income. So, that's how I have to get. But I'm putting my efforts into future earnings now.
Oh, yeah. What you're saying is something that we've heard throughout the history of this podcast. And it really comes down to two things. One, you're retweaking all your stuff. Like you just said, hey, get in the acoustic version, a 30-second version, 60-second version, all that type of stuff. We've heard small business owner after small business owner tell us about how, during this time period, they use it to take a step back, look at all their branding, their marketing, reevaluate, launch all of that. And then it also sounds like you're just creating more and more content that you're getting out there as well, too, to kind of fill that void. What type of permanent impact, though, do you think that this pandemic might have on the music industry as a whole?
It's going to have a major, long-lasting impact, because think about, I don't know if many bands will still do meet and greets, which is a great revenue source for some bands.
I got my picture with Stephen, Joe. I don't know if you can see it right there. I got Alice. Right there's Manson, Rob Zombie.
Obviously, the hope is that with the vaccine, that hopefully will be available and that people will take a little bit of it. But you know what? I feel like this pandemic is bad and it's life-changing. I have friends that have gotten it, and family members who have suffered. No one personally I know have died, but there are people out there who have. And to them, this is the most devastating thing ever.
Yeah.
So it will change how people do business. I think some things, they realize business like, we actually made this work and it was more efficient. We didn't have to all meet up at this place to do this. We could do this virtually. And that way we can not spend the money to travel or wherever it may be. I think those things will change. I think live music is live music.
Right.
You can't. That's one thing about in the music industry. It's the one revenue that people still need. You can't.
Right.
You may not
that's
make
a
the
big
money
source.
Off themselves.
That's a big source of the musician's income is the merchandising and the touring. Without
and you think about it. You take a band like the Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl has got to keep this machine going because it's not about just him. It's not his ego. He doesn't come across that way to me. But he's thinking about the 50 families
right,
that depend on the Foo Fighters for their, and they're middle class families.
right.
Aerosmith has in the neighborhood of that size crew, and most of us, are just middle class, and fortunate enough to be there to call themselves that. But it's. I know one guy that was working on the crew in Vegas, not with Aerosmith crew, but with the MGM crew. A friend of mine told me, he says, "Yeah, man, he lost his house and he's basically couch surfing." And it's sad to hear, man. So I count my blessings every night and just hope that we can get through this. But it will change how people do business, and money will be, once it opens up, it's going to be floodgates open up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I think it will be, because people are kind of getting antsy and are wanting to get out there and see shows and things like that. I mean, you're seeing some people doing that, I think, even with just like car and truck shows, so it's crazy. But I think when it does officially open, it's going to blow up pretty big. So we do got to start wrapping up. I have 3 final questions for you, Buck. Okay, first one is, you've already told us about how you're using some of this downtime to create more music and refine your stuff. Can you tell us, is Aerosmith or the Hollywood Vampires using any of the downtime to create more music for us? No? Oh.
No, they're listen, I think that eventually, Aerosmith may release unreleased pre-recorded stuff at some point one day. I'm just guessing.
Speculating.
No knowledge of that. Speculating. The Vampires did an album. Like I said, we did that. It was one of the things I was getting at earlier, is that you could take a recording studio in your overhead suitcase. And Tommy, who produced the album, bought one of these kind of mics, SM7. And Alice did his vocals on the road. I would, backstage, while we had time during the day, I would grab my keyboard setup and then overdub some keyboards, with this little Apollo universal audio interface. And there's no drop down in quality,
Right.
It's still, it's 24-bit.
It's amazing
great preamps.
How the quality is. Like you said, you fit it in a suitcase. I have mixing boards. I have audio recording DAWs, all that stuff. And there's some amazing studio quality stuff that you can get that's extremely portable right now.
It is, and it all adds up. It's to get the right stuff. It still can be expensive, but it allowed me, like when I was in Vegas all last year,
right.
I made an album, a solo album, and I recorded. You still got to go into a studio to record drums.
Right.
The drum sounds are key. If you don't have good drum sounds, you don't have a good record.
Right.
You don't have, especially rock bands. So, and that's same with the Hollywood Vampires. So, but I recorded the drums, the bass, the basics at a studio here in Nashville, and then I would bring my studio and my suite there I stayed at, and I had room to spread out, and I would do vocal overdubs, I would do editing.
Yeah.
It gave me something to do because I'm not a gambler, so I had a lot of downtime, and I didn't want to be that, the old adage, the devil's workshop.
Right. You kept busy, and you used technology as your friend to help you produce stuff.
So I had planned to release the album this year, then the pandemic hit, so I'm holding back on it. I've put out some live videos, which, you can check out on my YouTube page or all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We'll have a link to Buck's stuff in the description.
Right. Social media, it's all up on Facebook, and it's easy to find. But so I've done those virtual live versions with the band, because we had gigs booked, and we can't gig. And we talked about this earlier, bands that want to virtually do a live show. Now, they can do a live stream show, and I may do one of those at some point. But to do a virtual where we're all, homebound and we're on different locations, the latency the technology
doesn't work.
You can't play to a drummer that way. So what I did was and I just did this to kind of keep it out there. Like, yes, we have done this. This band is great. I want it to be heard. We want these songs at least to be heard live. And at some point, I will release the album. So all my guys have a setup similar to mine. And so I would lay down a piano vocal, and I would send it, and it was a live performance. Like, I just played and sang it down. I did it 2 or 3 times and picked the best one. And then Even if it had mistakes, even better. It's live. And then send it to the drummer, and he would do a live performance, and he would record it, the iPhone video, simultaneously with Pro Tools recording, multi-track drums. And then he would send it back to me. I would take the audio, mix it in Pro Tools, and then send that to the bass player. He would record the video performance while at the same time recording into Pro Tools. So I get the good audio that I need, but also it's capturing a live performance, but it's one step at a time, because we can't do it at the same time.
That's still intriguing, though. I mean, how you're using technology to be able to produce that. I love it.
I mean, it's purely promotion. It's not making any money for me, but that was my goal. That was my goal to. Listen how great this drummer is. So this guitar player, Damon Johnson, who I mentioned earlier. I mean, he's incredible. And by the way, so check out Damon Johnson. He's got great.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so we did that. But I was able to mix the audio, make it sound like, much like a live album, which, it's not that hard to do if you've been doing it. It's like no different than when we're playing live. You should hear my in-ear mix or Steven's, especially Steven's in-ear mix. It sounds like a live album. It's incredible, and it's very motivating. Obviously I'll have my parts on top, just because I need to hear me more. But I got to hear those guitars, man. I got to hear a lot of Steve sing with them.
That's just, that whole experience has just got to be awesome. So 2 very quick questions. Second to last one is for all the creative businesses out there like you. Do you have any final words of advice or something that they can do to try to make some pivots right now to survive until things open up with live shows?
Man, I wish I had some good advice. I think we're all hustling and trying things to figure it out, because no one really knows. We don't know what the virus is going to do. We don't know what's around the corner. I think you still got to get up early and do your best to navigate this by being creative and working hard. I don't have the answer. I wish I did.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know if I'm doing it.
Well, the answer is different for every person. That's what we're finding out.
It is, and I'm not knowledgeable enough in these other fields. I do think that people I think there will be a lot of new technologies created because of this pandemic, because people are at home, and what else have we got to do? And the ones who put the work in, I just always say, just focus on the work, man. Don't worry about what's going to happen or if it's going to work. It's just like I have an idea for a song. Well, it wasn't all that good to be sung. But you know what? I'm not worried about it. There's always another idea. I just got to put the work in, do the work. I'm taking my own advice because I'm working on this mountain of work, and it's going to. And then there's songs I don't own the masters to. I got to make my own recording of it if I want to make any money. So. It's that's it, man.
As
far as the
that's
details,
great. I mean, the details. I think that's up to every single person to kind of decide and figure that out on their own. But I mean, just having that drive is what I'm hearing to continue, keep producing, and just hope that you get a little bit of luck so that things shake your way.
And if nothing else, it gets your mind off the news and what's going on, and you're focusing something creative. If you're being creative, you're being productive. It just doesn't mean that, what I'm creating today may not make money for me today or tomorrow, but maybe something always good comes from it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And if nothing else, it's good for my soul. It makes me not think about everything else, and I can move forward.
Yeah, definitely. Last question for you. As we've discussed throughout this whole thing, you've been on the road with some legendary people in my book. What's your favorite road story that you can tell us about that they won't get mad at you for?
Oh, I don't know. I think I've had to plead the fifth there. I don't know, man. Gosh, I should think of these things when it comes up because it's usually probably more related to me. I could tell. You know what? It's going to be one of these things after we hang up, I'm like, dang, I should have told him that story.
Oh, yeah? No problem.
I will say this, that, and it's not because it's me, but because it's the only thing I can think of. When I got that call from Steven, I flew to Istanbul. Mm-hmm. By the time the odyssey of getting there, by the time I got to Istanbul, and by the time I got to the venue, it was the first show of the European tour, so they always do a production rehearsal just to make sure everything's working right. The band rehearses a little bit. So I got there, and by that point in time, I hadn't slept in 2 days. Because get home to Nashville, I got packed. I gotta like start woodshedding, like writing charts, making sure I've got every song of Aerosmith I can have in my phone and on my laptop, and all that, and then get on the plane, and I can't sleep. I've got a woodshed, and I got to make sure and listen, make notes, and because like songs like "Don't Want to Miss a Thing," obviously I got to play that, and that's not a hard song to play. Just don't screw it up in front of 50,000 people when it's just you and Steven. No pressure, right? So I get to Istanbul, I meet with Steven. We go to his dressing room. He's only heard me sing online, and I come in with Marty's trying to get some recommendation. I have acoustic guitar, and the first song we play is Crying, because it's one of the higher harmony parts. It's really freaking high. And I love playing that song, too. I love singing that song with Steven. And no lie, man, we get to the first chorus, and he just holds out his hands. He's really a sweet, big-hearted, emotional person. And his eyes just well up, and I was kind of taken back. He goes, "Where have you been?" And I'm like, man, I get all emotional. I'm like, this is a dream come true for me. I waited for this moment to happen. So we hugged it out, and we talked about singing together and how, he's digging this. And that was overwhelming to me because, most of the time you don't get that, and he doesn't hold back. And we sang a few more songs, and he was excited. And then I played with the band on stage, and there's a point, we went through Jaded, and there's a point where the band, you probably know this, where in the last verse, the band stops, and we hold the high note, and he's just holding it, right? Right? And I'm above that, a third above it, full voice. And I knew that happened because I listened to some live tapes, but Steven's trying to I'm going to show him off, and he starts looking at his watch, like he's looking at his watch, and he's still holding it. And I thought I was going to pass out, but I damn sure make sure I was not going to let go of that note, and, and he was smiling after it was over. And then when that ends, the band comes back in, and at that moment, the whole band turned around and looked at me and smiled. And that's when I knew, I think I'm going to have this gig. So,
that was their way of hazing you.
A little bit, I think.
Yeah, that's funny.
And then after that, I met my keyboard tech, and he's a legend, and we have the best crew in the world. We call him Haystacks. Yeah. And he's worked with everybody. You name him, he's probably worked with them. And when he's not worked with me, with Aerosmith, he's been worked with people like Fleetwood Mac and so forth. But he goes, he's from West Virginia. He goes, and he's really smart. Like, he's incredibly smart. And he goes, by his accent there, he goes, you got so much to learn, I don't know where to begin. And talking about the rig. And so I had to go take the rig, the keyboard, a couple of laptops for the sounds, to my hotel room in Istanbul. So there was no going seeing this legendary.
So you had to learn on the go, it sounds like.
Yeah, I had to spend up a third night in a row. I had an iPad with it's called an Unreal book I use to, I'm able to chart and mainly write down, have the lyric typed up and use our yellow highlighter, the program, to say, okay, harmonize this line, skip that line, harmonize those 3 words on this line. The next line is these other 2 words you got to harmonize. It's very specific with Steven. You start analyzing it, and you see, okay, there's no way to, retain that much information for the first few shows. So I had this iPad I could use, which people have seen musicians use these before. But honestly, if it had been just playing, I would go, okay, it's the singing and the playing. And then it's the mapping of, on this keyboard, okay, on this song, you've got piano here, you've got strings up here, you've got horns down here. On another song, it's a different layout because we need to have this sound here you have to play. So I had to learn the mapping and then go through and make that note on the iPad, so I know where to play on what part of the keyboard. So I did that. I wake up. I don't wake up. I stay up all night. I'm meeting Haystacks for breakfast at 10, and I finished just in time to make it down to breakfast. And I said, "Hey, man, I know I'm supposed to go to the venue at 11 to get my in-ears and check and get the rig set up so I'm comfortable." He says, "I got to lay down for 3 hours. I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm not going to make it." He goes, "Well, you're on a fall beat." And I'm like, "All right, well, just call me." So sure enough, I fall deep, deep sleep. And it's like, the phone in your dream is getting closer and closer and closer. He must have let it ring 30 times before I picked up an answer. And he goes, "Buck, you need to get up, get dressed. There's been a mining accident. There's riots in the streets, and we got to get out." And honestly, I thought it was part of a dream. Like, I'm still dreaming. And then he said it again. I'm like, oh. My second thought was, is he punking me? I'm like, that's pretty cruel, But no, he's like, "Oh, you got to get going, And sure enough, there was a mining accident in Istanbul where it lost the lives of 300 men. And I think the government at the time had refused to do inspections. They wanted to keep production going. And so the people were really upset about it, and they took it to the streets. Tear gas, rubber bullets, the whole thing. And it's right by our hotel. And so we got out in time, but that gave me 2 more days to work on it. So my first show was actually in Sofia, Bulgaria. And that was interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really crazy. That's pretty interesting. How that all transpired, and it kind of worked to your advantage because it gave you those 2 extra days to learn everything.
And to sleep.
Yeah, and to sleep. To sleep. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to be falling asleep during Dream On, right?
No, not that I don't think that would happen to me on stage. I think the adrenaline carried me because this gig, like I said, I've been really blessed over the years to play with some amazing artists, but this one was even more so because the music and what Aerosmith meant to me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I can imagine. Anyways, Buck, it's been a great pleasure having you here on Shark Bite Biz.
Mine, man. Thank
Great
you.
Stories. What's your website again?
That's simply buckjohnson.com. You can find me on social media, Buck Johnson Music on Facebook, Buck Johnson Official on Instagram. And I think those are the 2 places really. The website is there, but I think that all the content in today's world, especially in this pandemic, is coming through Instagram and Facebook.
Oh,
so
yeah.
And then keep in touch. There's videos, there's all kind of stuff, and then new music will be coming. I just don't know when. Maybe in the fall or definitely next year.
Yeah, well, you keep busy creating right now, and we're going to look forward to that music. Thank you again so much, Buck. Love everything you came on to share.
Great. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Every interview and discussion I have is amazing. Watch all the videos. When I come back, I'm like, incredible discussion, amazing conversation. Every single time, but this one was super amazing. I love hearing stories about my idols, my legends, especially when it comes down to Aerosmith, and Buck Johnson is no exception to that. I'm a huge Buck Johnson fan. His music, his personality, his attitude, his ego, the business side of Buck. I love everything about the dude. So a couple good nuggets came out of this interview. 1, hard work pays off. Keep your head low and just be the best you are at what you do, and you can unlock potential that you never imagined possible. You might have hoped something was possible, but did Buck ever think that he would be playing with the legendary bands that he is? No, it was that hard work that really paid off. And number 2 is relationships. Because of not burning bridges, but actually building and creating strong personal relationships, Buck had the doors opened up for him to work with the legendary band Aerosmith and now the Hollywood Vampires. Lastly, number 3, keep creating. I reinforce this probably every single episode I have, and now is the time to be creating content, whether it's social media content, music, videos, images, whatever. Buck is creating nonstop in this downtime created by this pandemic, and he's going to have a huge catalog that he's able to manage his business with once things pick back up again. Look, being a hired gun might not be the path Buck has always dreamt of, but ultimately, he accepts that is what his path is up until this point in his life. He knows his role. He not only appreciates the opportunity he got, he is extremely humble about it. This is huge for career growth because when this same old song and dance ends with Aerosmith, this experience is going to open up even more doors for him to walk this way through. Make sure you check out the Hollywood Vampires album. I believe the album was called Rise, and it's got all of the original music on it that Buck was talking about. And he features on it too. It actually has writing credits on the song How the Glass Fell. And he performed, I believe, in all the songs. Embrace the opportunities you get, just like Buck. Embrace those opportunities in business because you'll never know when the next one will come. So what do you think about Buck's career choice? Would you take it? Or would you let your ego keep you from being the hired gun in a legendary band? Discuss on YouTube and let's see what you all think. Love this episode? Help us grow. We are just about 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I'm itching to hit 2,500. Okay? Smash that subscribe button, but most importantly, share the video. Now, I know I'm talking about YouTube, but don't forget, we also have iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so that way you can listen to every episode as they come out every Monday and Thursday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, don't forget, you've got to check out our Teespring store. The link will be in the pinned comments below. Once again, I'm David Strausser. This is Shark Bite Biz, and I'll see you again next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Shark Bite Biz. We hope you got some insightful info from this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and visit us on the web at www.sharkbitebiz.com. How has business changed for you in the 20s? Email us at podcast@sharkbitebiz.com so you can join us and share your story.